So now with The Last of Us, the video game being turned into a TV series, a lot of people are talking about Pedro Pascal's facial features. Pedro is an actor of Chilean origins, and he seems to seemingly grab the hearts of many viewers in his portrayal of Joel. His facial features contribute to the believability of his acting, and this is the fact that I want to talk about in this video. In this video, we're going to discuss what some of Pedro's defining facial characteristics are and how they tie into his casting as Joel himself. Also, how is it that he seems to be getting more attractive into his late 40s? Is it just a pull of being on a major TV role, or is there another facial aesthetics explanation? Pedro has what we call the puppy-eyed look that most people associate with brown eyes. Does this make him more trustworthy? Well, sort of. Research by Kleisner et al. Did initially show a correlation between brown eyes and trustworthiness. However, after switching the brown-eyed faces to now having blue eyes, brown eyes actually did not have an effect on perceived trustworthiness. But rather, it may be that Pedro has certain features that tend to come packaged with brown eyes, or people who come from geographies that have brown eyes, and those increase his trustworthiness, not the brown eyes themselves. Like we expressed in this video, the color of the eyes is very arbitrary. It's the features of the eyes that make the actual aesthetics. Some of these features that the paper notes are a broader chin, eyebrows that are closer to one another, a bigger nose, and a bigger mouth. And Pedro actually possesses most of these traits. So why do these more robust facial features seem to come packaged with brown eyes? The researchers offer some explanation in the form of biosocial adaptation and evolutionary-based hormonal influence, though they note that more research should be done to actually find out what causes the increased trustworthiness in brown-eyed faces. Is it just the eye color, is it the shape, or is it the features overall? Either way, Pedro has brown eyes and the associated facial shapes that give him a more trustworthy appearance. Recent research in 2022 by Siringu and colleagues emphasizes the importance of the eyes in impressions of trust. They noted how participants increased the contrast between the pupil to iris and the sclera, or the white of the eyes, when attempting to make a face more trustworthy. We can alter Pedro's eye contrast in Photoshop and see that this changes his impressions of trustworthiness. We can demonstrate this in two ways. In the first, we see that making the whites of his eyes brighter seems to give him a more trustworthy and vibrant appearance. The second way is that we can change the color of his iris to increase or decrease the contrast with the rest of his face. With darker eyes, Pedro appears more trustworthy, and with lighter eyes, he appears less trustworthy. Pedro is right in the middle. His brown eyes already have the high scleral contrast that the paper makes note of, but this perhaps gives him that more homely and trustworthy appearance. And if you think of his Last of Us casting, Ellie seems to exclusively trust Joel, and a lot of the casting is based around trust. If you don't trust him in an apocalyptic scenario, it's kind of hard to survive. While that also certainly has to do with his personality, the facial appearance has to correspond. It's not by coincidence that he was chosen for this role. At his nature, Joel is a trustworthy character to those he loves, but at the same time he has to display emotional impenetrability and ruthlessness. Pedro's mixture of facial features displays that well. The contrast with the white sclera is a uniquely human trait that facilitates discrimination of gaze direction and allows individuals to guess where other people are looking at or their intentions. Other research by Todorov showed brown-eyed people are perceived as happier and less shy than blue-eyed individuals, consistent with findings showing that trustworthy faces are linked to positive emotions. And so yes, the puppy dog look may be a very real thing, and something about brown eyes do give off the more cheerful and trustworthy impression. Pedro Pascal is Chilean, and so his characteristically Hispanic nose is one of the most defining facial features. While there are variations when it comes to Hispanic rhinoplasty, Pedro has the most common nasal characteristics: a slightly downturned nasal tip, a prominent dorsum and nasal bridge, and a wide interalar width, basically a wide nasal base. This adds character and masculinity to the face. A paper by Andreas et al. Investigated sexually dimorphic differences in the Chilean nose. In other words, what is different about the male nose when compared to the female one in the Chilean population? For most of his assessments, there were significant differences. Pedro demonstrated nearly all of those dimorphic differences, where first, Pedro's base width, or the width of his nose, is quite wide. His nasofrontal angle is right about average with the male Chilean sample, and so he doesn't have an incredibly masculinized brow and upper nasal region. Still, his other nasal features point to a highly dimorphic masculinized nose, and his nasion is incredibly projected, and his nose creates a low nasolabial angle of around 90 degrees. Overall, this adds to an aura of maturity and competence that allows him to play a character like Joel. Adjusting his nose to be more pretty in both the front and side profile actually takes away from that believability of a mature character. kind of like the nose of a child. Especially in a real-life adaptation, these subtle changes in facial features help the viewer's immersion. Even video game Joel had some ruggedness and mild imperfections to his nose. Those Photoshop changes are simply done by feminizing the nose parameters described in Andreas's paper by simply comparing it to what the female Chilean nose looks like. Pedro's face seems to benefit from the rugged and prominent nose. Similarly, we can alter the parameters on the front profile where a narrow nose with a less prominent nose bridge and dorsum just doesn't add the same distinctiveness to the face, and even his subtle nose asymmetries do add character. His wider nose shape also harmonizes well with his wide bone structure. While research on grey hair, facial attractiveness and social perceptions all in one is quite difficult to come across, there are some implications in research done by Huang and Rompoulos. Huang references a study by Zhang and colleagues in 2020, where they try to resolve the long-standing concern that psychological stress creates grey hair. If this is true, this could relate to Pedro's portrayal of Joel. Joel lives quite a stressful life in a post-apocalyptic zombie-ridden world, so grey hair often denotes wisdom, maturity, or generally having been and seen a few things. Additionally, video game Joel has grey hair, and it immerses us more into that world. Zhang did find a mechanism by which stress can cause greying. Melanocyte stem cells produce the pigment during the hair follicle's regeneration cycle. When stressed, the adrenal glands release noradrenaline. These stem cells reside and then they start to deplete. The hair growth that follows lacks in color. This is certainly quite interesting, but it's not necessarily a bad thing that Pedro has notably grey hair in his late 40s. In the context of playing Joel, the slightly weathered appearance works to his benefit. Even in a general sense, it makes him more dependable and competent, and certainly more mature. So far, all of the things that we've discussed cue into how his facial features relate to a higher level of maturity, masculinity, and trustworthiness. So that sets up the question, why does he seem to be more attractive now than when he was younger? Yes, some of that could certainly be due to the spotlight that he is given right now, and while Pedro is no stranger to that, The Last of Us is arguably his most celebrated role. However, he also seems to be aging into his looks. As a younger actor, Pedro had clashing facial characteristics. On one hand, his hollow buccal region, prominent nose, and light brows tend to make a face look more mature. On the other hand, his near-flawless youthful skin and lack of facial hair do the opposite. So this incongruence makes him look a bit older than he was at the time, and now in his mature facial features, they're matching up with his graying hair, the fine facial lines, and facial hair. In fact, it was almost as if he was playing catch-up with his older self. He now looks more his age, whereas he looked older in his younger roles. So there you have it. That's what breaks down Pedro Pascal's appearance, and a lot of it is just around trust and maturity. He just looks like a trustworthy father figure. That's exactly what Joel is in his casting. So if you want to learn more about your face now, just like we broke it down for Pedro's, well, you can head over to the QOVES website and order a facial assessment performed by a team of doctors and dentists and learn more about what you can do to improve the way that you look and have a breakdown of your face just like we did with Pedro's. As always, that's over at the QOVES website, and I'll catch you in the next one.